Hey, it's your boy Dustin from the Flying Chairs, the Rise podcast. And guess what? Today I got a special guest, and you won't guess who this guy is. His name is Ray YoungBear, and this guy is amazing. And I was following him for a while, and he has his own personal experiences with UFOs. And yeah, he told me quite a story the last time I talked to him, and I just had to have him on here. So, hey, Ray, let us know where you grew up and how you got into the field of ufology.
Thank you for having me here, Dustin, on Flying Chariots. I'm quite frazzled in terms of my mental status. I've got custody of two grandkids, and they keep me highly entertained. But at the same time, I'm trying to compose work and trying to keep a rational sense about me and being creative at the same time. But background wise, I was born November 12, 1950. I live in central Iowa on land that was founded by my grandfather in 1856. He appealed with the help of, I believe, some white landowners or white Iowans to seek a place of residence. And lo and behold, the Iowa lawmakers agreed with the proposal, which included a petition by Iowans at that time, allowing us to seek residence here. And that sagacious act by my grandfather was pretty much has pretty much set the cultural tone for this community. Uh, we often try to impress one another, other tribes, especially of what can be retained and what can be imparted to the incoming generations. And the Meskwaki settlement was based upon the preservation of culture for the children. So oftentimes when I'm asked to make presentations, I make note of the fact that uh, my grandfather did not say for my people to establish this place in the center of Iowa, but for the children and their grandchildren and thereafter. So that was the grand plan in 1856. And it amazes me to this day how things worked to our favor at that time, considering, you know, the state of this country presently.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, in 1856, the land was bought. Originally, we were from the East Coast, and then eventually, due to colonization, we started coming this way to the Mississippi Valley, where we made our homelands here, beginning from coming down from the Dubuque and all the way down to the Rock Island, Illinois encampment. That was perhaps our last place where we stood our ground, attempted to with Chief Blackhawk, our neighbors to the south. But we were able to uh, enact defense of our territories at that time. We lost, but historically there are records of skirmishes and encounters with Illinois militia. But eventually, some of our land got whittled away from the 1830s, the Black Hawk War, and we were moved to Kansas and Oklahoma, other places, so that we wouldn't present any kind of threat, perhaps for Iowa. But my grandfather eventually got homesick. He wasn't interested in residence elsewhere, particularly places where it was very hard to grow crops, and temperature-wise, it was different. But he longed to come back to the state of Iowa, and so he lobbied through to the all Iowa lawmakers to be given permission to reside here. And so that was done in 1856. In 1857, we secured the first acres, 80 acres, I believe, and then thereafter, the the push to buy back land that had been stolen over the years began. and that was, I guess, a secondary approach from my grandfather. But when you think of that, that's incredible. At that time, and to think that 1856, that was you're barely coming out of the frontier days, and
Hmm.
then you know the dates are important because 1856, and then I think of 1874 thereafter in terms of the work that I'm doing presently, the research with the connections of the Meskwaki settlement here in central Iowa. I was born in November 12, 1950, as I stated. I'm presently 74 years of age. I've been writing in the second language of English for about 50 years. It took me a while to get accustomed to the enunciation of the English language. I had difficulty throughout junior high and high school. I despised mathematics and sciences, largely because I couldn't access, I didn't have the foundation to, understand that because there was no priming on the part of my traditional parents to, impart what equations were and so forth. And so that was new to me. And unfortunately, I didn't understand it and probably failed, but somehow I got passed and
Wow.
graduated from South Tama High School in 1969. And so
Cool.
everything thereafter has been centered on literature, uh, the attempt and quest to perfect my understanding of the English language. It's been a struggle while attempting to retain my Meskwaki language, culture, spirituality, and history, and to try and keep a proper balance. Hoping that I can survive modernity. So that's essentially the task that Meskwakis face today. And living in the center of Iowa is interesting. Geographically, it makes me wonder why did we seek to reside here? And that question has much to do with my encounters with UFOs. This began, I guess, there's been a series of events in my life wherein non-ordinary events have pretty much created, I guess, vivid memories to the point where, I rarely recall anything else but, those things. And they're essential to perhaps my understanding, perhaps my mission, if there's such a thing as that on Earth. And as I've imparted to you, Dustin, to the material submitted yesterday,
Mhm.
one of the first things that I saw as a youth, in my youth at 5 years of age in 1956, uh, the photograph that you've got with Russell, my brother, and
Yeah,
myself,
let's get that up.
that is a very good photograph of myself in Western attire. It must have been close to that time when I stood facing the south here in my grandmother's garden, and behold what I perceived later as a daytime meteor or bolide. And that manifestation astounded me, to see something on fire, silver and smoking, and then
Hmm.
to quietly disintegrate before my eyes to the south horizon in Iowa, central Iowa, and then to see the smoke itself extend almost like spiders, but it was burning debris coming down on Earth. And so that manifestation uh, was something that uh, got planted in my brain, and it was hard to extract. And then, and then in 1958, there was another unusual manifestation wherein my grandmother prepared my brother and I to walk close to Christmas time to my elementary school Christmas program,
Hmm.
whereby I had to hold a letter, perhaps C for Christmas or something like that, or M for Merry Christmas. but we had to take the stage, had that in my class, and recite these letters and what they meant. But before that happened, we were bundled up, going with my grandmother down the road about maybe half a mile or less. Winter day, it was tolerable. We just had to dress well, warm, I mean. But
Hmm.
halfway to uh, the tribal elementary school, we noticed some fireflies. And at that time, being young, that I didn't, realize that, they can't possibly survive winter, especially in December in
Oh,
Iowa.
sure,
But,
sure, sure.
I was young and my brother was young. But my grandmother summoned us to uh, look at this manifestation of these fireflies. We call them in our language wasasihug, coming down from tree line of pine trees. And it was extraordinary because they came down in very mesmerizing motion, as if like it's a swirl coming down,
Oh,
and eventually eventually uh, lighting themselves up in front of me, as if in front of us, as if to block our way. And it was then that my grandmother began saying, "Pagkameko kiweb asituban and agun gihawab." Start hitting these, use the snow, and we immediately got snow, packed it up with dirt, and it was kind of half melted from perhaps the road and cars, and so we were able to mold some snowballs and try to thwart this manifestation of fireflies. It took maybe three or four volleys, and then they went back to the pine trees. And then we continued our walk to the school, and I found myself on the gymnasium and walking to the stage to do my routine. But therein is where the questions began on my part. What was is this? What did I see in my grandmother's garden? Moreover, what did we see together with our grandmother that night during Christmas, close to Christmas? And then that, eventually faded away, the memory, the event itself until 1968 and then 1980, 12 years apart, at the same place south of here on tribal land, there was two manifestations that makes me that made me more aware that there might be connections to whatever was happening here. It's just a hypothesis, a theory, but I've developed it over the past 45 years, um, from 1980 on, in trying to methodically assess as best I can with the limited knowledge that I have of what may be here on the Meskwaki settlement. Of course, yeah, I'm not saying they are here, the UFOs. I'm saying, within my own perspective, there are things that have happened here that lead me to conclude that they may be here. I'm not saying that
yeah,
exactly,
yeah. Was
but
it the one with the?
there's
Was
enough
it?
things that I've researched that I could outline for you. But if there's anything you want to say, just then just hop aboard.
Yeah, no. I was gonna say, was that one the last story that you were talking about? Was that the one involved with the owls?
That one in 1980, yes, that one was the
Let me pop
pivotal
those pictures
event.
up
Now,
here.
1968 was also important in that, it formed, it's kind of like the vortex of these two incidents. On 1968 one, there was four flying saucers, disc shaped, that descended south of the power grounds here. And,
Is it this one
my
here?
uncle and a high school friend of mine, no longer here, witnessed these, but my uncle coolly said to us in one moonlit night in September, "Do you boys believe in flying saucers?" Before my friend and I answered, he pointed in the moonlight ground at the ball grounds to the sky, and the 45-degree angle. So we turned left, and lo and behold, there were four silver flying saucers descending from the moonlit clouds, sparsely clouded, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
full moonlight pretty much. But these were wondrous looking things that ascended that, is quite a spectacle. Had never seen one. I may have watched movies during the 58, 10 years previously in Tama, Iowa, but to see them was something else. And I don't know how long we observed them, but they eventually zipped westward over the railroad tracks, going over the Iowa River nearby. But 12 years later, in 1980, one September night, about the same time as 12 years previously, my wife and I were coming home to the Iowa River floodplains, and it was a homestead of Mr. Willie Johnson, now in the grandfather world, but the family lived there and eventually uh, moved out of there. And so, in 1980, my wife and I just to have temporary residence there, and it was a decision I now wonder about because it wasn't long before I think lived we moved there from University of Northern Iowa, 1978, and resided there for several years. Then, but 1980 fall, the autumn season, just when Iowa harvesting season began with the hunting and the combines all lit up and dust in the air, grain dust
Mhm,
and so forth.
mhm,
We were coming home to three owls that were awaiting us or welcomed us, or they were there.
mhm.
There were no lights on. The dogs were hyper. But one owl sounded off, and the stupid me went against the squawky precepts that if an owl is there, don't disturb it, don't try to interact with it. But I was just a young man, 40, and not thinking. And so not only that, I'm also a musician, a singer, a vocalist, and
Oh,
I
sweet.
just thought it was, an opportune time to, stress my vocal cords, but that was a lesson learned, a turbo one. So I was able to imitate the first owl and surpass him, and then the second one, him or her, it, whatever they. The second one sounded off and challenged me, and then I challenged it, and surpassed it, they, her, him, whatever. And then the third one, it wasn't as I don't think it was as loud, but it was there, and so I answered it, and then it gave me something back, and it went on for maybe a couple of times until the last one, maybe the second or third exchange, was something that I couldn't handle, not in the sense of vocal delivery, but the immediately, as I said the other night, Dustin, it felt, if there's such a thing as, there is such a thing as a grenade concussion or percussion or whatever you feel from the force of the grenade. And if that was what I felt. Move, I
Oh.
was moved back several footsteps. And at
Mhm.
that point, I told my wife Stella that these are not owls. And my immediate thought was they were something supernatural,
Yeah.
and I don't think they were in retrospect because Um, the three owls, we began shooting them with 22 caliber squirrel rifles and a pistol, a sidearm. And so we stood there in the night, and they called out as we began shooting, which was interesting. So, but we shot more, whatever we could load, and with Stella loading the rifles or the whatever we had at that time. There was a 22 Magnum. I think probably a semi-automatic 22 rifle and probably one pistol. And so we expended those rounds at the owls, but we thought we had scared them off until I started seeing fireflies rise from where we had just shot. And this is where a sense of perspective became different. Stella viewed these fireflies coming out of the tree line, formerly owls, as distant jets um, in V formation headed to the southeast from our direction. But from my perspective, and she was about just 10, 15 feet away, from my perspective, they were fireflies and that they had formed themselves into a V formation and flying slowly. It did give an appearance as if they were 20 miles away, like in Grinnell, flying over Grinnell, Iowa. But you know that was the point where uh, perspectives became different, and I think we kind of gave up on, we walked back to the house. I think we wanted to get some more bullets because I don't think it was, we didn't think it was over. And so, while Stella was loading the bullets, I stayed out there, and then I began seeing, this a ball, what I now think was an orb, kind of like a street light, old time American globe looking light, dim, not luminous, that was about 4 to 5 feet off the ground, hovering my way in continuing where the fireflies had left. I saw this, apparition or whatever it was, orb come my way. And then Stella came out of the house, and I remembered clearly what my grandmother had said, that in the event I encountered adversity of a supernatural form, I should confess to it, as much as, this is an equivalent, as much as a Catholic that does in those stalls that, they make a
Yeah.
confession.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my grandmother was saying, not equating that, but saying you should advise this negative form, that you haven't done anything to anybody, nor your companion, that you're merely trying to live your life, and that if there's anything negative that is being brought upon you, then you request that force or negativity return to its source. And moreover, she said, if this manifestation does not let up, you have a choice of disrobing, because the supernaturals, when they go out into the night, they totally disrobe, which is why they are not seen, which is why they are able to shape shift into different things. And so I was thinking that this globe looking orb or thing was that a
Hmm.
supernatural element, negative element. So I briefly
Hmm.
thought about disrobing, started unbuttoning my shirt, and was about to take it off while doing this confession. But something popped into my head, and I think it was Candid Camera, that old time
Yeah.
show
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
where, you surprise the
Yeah.
people with the camera, and, a stunt and a trick. So I thought, what the hell? I shouldn't do that, standing here naked, and they're going to turn on the lights. And so I just, backed out of that, feeling foolish, absolutely ridiculous, and went back to the house and hooked up with Stella, who had the guns ready. And I
Jesus.
don't know what happened. I think we said that we're low on ammunition, and we should get the hell out of here. And so we got back at the house, and, got what ourselves together, basically just to catch a breath and, digest that night what we had
Oh
just
yeah.
seen.
That was
But I
crazy.
think we went out with some bullets, and then lo and behold, there was a reddish kind of a flare light in front of the house, and so we just unleashed whatever bullets we had. But each bullet we shot made the entity grow. I mean,
Whoa.
massively. 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. By the time we got done shooting, it was as big as a bus. Um, red, fluorescent colored, hovering,
Wow.
manifesting right in front of us, lit the whole forest behind us, everything around. And then that one started floating to the west. And so we just let just took a breath and said, Jesus Christ, what the hell was that? And so, that went. And so we went back, and I think said, where all the bullets is scrammed. So as we walked to the 1974 Nova SS, uh, from a nearby apple tree, and the one we had picked and ate from, several summers, the globe or whatever that was went in there, or something went in there and began flashing, emitting a very powerful strobe light that blinded our eyes as we were walking to the Nova. And that surprised me as hell, because I can still recall my shadows as being the most distinct I've ever seen in my life.
Whoa.
Trying to go to the car, and you know shielding my eyes with my arm as I fumbled for the keys, tried to open a door, and still the same thing going around the car. And then, I was hoping, praying, if I rev up the car, 350 engine, and then, shine lights on it, bright lights, it'll go away. And so I did that, did the lights, but it just, the strobe light increased. And then we blazed out of there with the strobe light following us to our left about 20 or 30 feet high, maybe, yeah, away and high, just paralleling us for about a mile to E49 highway. Used to be Old Highway 30 long time ago, but at the stop sign, uh, we we stopped, observed the stop sign there, but that UFO that had decreased in size while it was flashing from past a basketball size to a baseball size, stopped also above us. It was still flashing, but it observed a stop sign with us. We
Hmm.
said, we believe it did anyway, but as we turned left, shooting toward the Meskwaki settlement across Iowa River Bridge, the escort orb crossed a field and then paralleled us from the railroad tracks, and we were on a highway shooting for another mile. And as we crossed the Iowa River Bridge, Stella found a single 22 Magnum bullet in the glove compartment of the car and said, I got a bullet." And then she gave it to me, and I stopped the Nova on the east side of the highway bridge and got out around, and that strobe light was above the railroad tracks, close by, maybe about 100 yards. We were on the highway bridge. So it was on the other side. It was about, I'd say, about 100 feet in air, or 150 feet. And then I spoke to it, Meskwaki, and in Meskwaki, I said, may I mention that unknown actawag, wasawin inukinang. In translation, this is the last bullet we have. At least on this one, would you please leave? And so I fired at it, and lo and behold, it zipped to the sky and became a star. And I thought, story over, and we proceeded to my grandmother's, and told this horror story. And she said that I've never heard of anything in my life like that. And that was that
Wow.
was the first night.
Holy shit. Especially when your wife there was witnessing that with you. Holy fuck.
Pardon?
The fact that your wife was noticing the whole interaction of you guys firing at this strobe light
Yeah,
and won't bother, like you're driving away trying to get away from this thing.
yeah. And I guess the quick way to summarize that exchange is, a 45-year encapsulation. Why did that happen on that night?
Yeah.
Why did it happen to us? Those things race through your mind. I was 40 then, I'm 74, today, but I've analyzed this stuff exhaustively, and have come to the conclusion that we were politely, diplomatically evicted from what I've called the Limestone Shelf. And the Limestone Shelf is a title I've given a book of poems. My next book, I've written 6 books. I've got 2 more
Yeah.
in the works. I'll have 8 books in a year or two.
Yeah.
But the
I'll put some of the
limestone
books up.
shelf signifies what is beneath the Meskwaki settlement. And I've been researching this, and Tama County geologic records from the early 1900s verifies the fact that at the Meskwaki Power Grounds on the Iowa River, on the other side, the limestone shelf begins and extends all the way to LeGrand, Iowa, about 4 or 5 miles upriver. And in the geological records of Tama County, it's it's provided information that in the glacier period, the prehistoric period, there were three glacier movements that pretty much went over central Iowa, and in particular here. And what happened was, as each glacier movement went by, and this was long after the 350 or 500 or 350 million years when Iowa was theoretically submerged in warm seas near the equator. And some of that, placement is attributable to the fossils found beneath here in our home on Red Earth Drive on the Meskwaki settlement. And so that information pretty much comports that, this place may have been, under the seas at that time so many years ago. And so the more I read about this, the more I realized that what if the UFOs wanted to extract
Mm-hmm.
limestone? And the limestone here in Tama County is not just regular limestone, like off the street limestone. I'm going to use some terms here, off the street limestone. This is 100% pure limestone. It's called Kinderhook. And Kinderhook is perhaps full of more preserved fossils than the norm. And
Is it this that is
hypothetically,
that that is it the rock that you sent me? The pictures of the rock?
but yeah, I mean that's perhaps part of that. I think there's probably quartz as well as some sort of a something running through it. It's unique because when you hold that quartz up to the light, is you can see through it. It's transparent and it's got veins on it.
Yeah, here we go.
But
I got the pictures of it.
the quartz I've discovered in terms of its properties is potentially uh, it contains an electrical force, but it has to be primed. Limestone, as I've discovered, has those same elements, only combustible.
Mm.
And so this ties in with my theory that UFOs possibly, I'm not saying they do, but there's enough evidence here for me to conclude that the Kinderhook limestone, may provide a source of energy to a higher intelligence like UFOs. Human beings have researched how they can use limestone. So they've done all kinds of things with it, quick lime,
And there's
and
like
all
the
kinds of ways. But
electricity.
at a certain point, when you start changing the formula of limestone, whenever you get, if it's a real converted form whereby it's combustible, what makes it explode is water. If you
Mm.
combine it with water. And so I thought, holy mackerel, that this is, how can this be from this fossil? And so the more I thought about it over the years, you know, I thought, if UFOs have the wherewithal to siphon, extract this energy from the limestone, from the fossils, which is probably their source of energy 350, 500 million years ago, then, I'm on board with that theory until disproven.
Sure.
Um, and so that's been coursing through my mind. You know, we've got Dr. A.V. Loeb at Harvard with his eyes and minds and $1 billion, $1 million or whatever he's got in the
You know,
Galileo
he was
project,
on my
looking up at the
podcast.
skies.
Yeah.
My thoughts are, what the hell are you doing? You got to look down, you got to ascertain. if they're here already,
Yeah. No,
So,
I like Professor
I'm
Avilope.
looking here, he's looking up there. It's hard for it's going to be hard for me to convince scholars like Mr. Loeb, Professor Loeb, that an ancient Indian farmer like myself can come up with these theories and hopefully can publish in them. But Dustin, your show is hopefully the foundation of that.
Yeah. Well,
And
I was just going to tell you that
uh,
Professor Avilope was on my show. If you
pardon?
didn't know that, Professor Avilope was on my show from Harvard.
Oh, he was. Okay.
He
Yes,
was,
yeah.
yeah. So
He's
I can
got he's
send you
got
that
he,
episode if you like, because it's amazing. Because him and his team have been going down in the oceans picking up
mhm.
scrapples of a UFO crash from 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
mind blowing stuff.
my takeaway from AV Loeb is that, he may never see a UFO in his life,
Hmm.
much less discover a benign antimatter from the ocean. He needs to
Hmm.
assess limestone as possibly being an alternative energy source for not only UFOs, but ETs, but human beings,
Yeah,
rather than uh, try to determine how UFO can descend, 28,000 miles an hour and not crash. You
sure,
know, that's for us. That's impossible. I think we need to figure out, what's propelling this, and I've come up with formulas with the help of artificial intelligence that is basically doing the research for me. I know what I want to say, and I know how things might work. It's just that I don't have the mathematical or the science wherewithal to summarize everything and say this is how it works.
sure.
But the more I read about limestone, the more I think the earth that we presently have is facing an enormous uh, pressure from humanity, largely from the carbon emissions, because this is where this is going. The carbon emissions that humanity releases is attributable to global warming.
Mm,
And it is my belief that the arc volcanoes that are primarily centered in the Caribbean region uh, that provide one third of the carbon emissions in the world are doing their work naturally, self-regulating the carbon emissions that are natural. So expelling them, historically doing their job. And these are just, several volcanoes. Arc volcanoes are the ones in a chain, like the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. But I
mm.
don't think those are of the Caribbean variety. But those that are presently active now in, I believe, Guatemala, Ecuador, and so forth, those are arc volcanoes. In that, they are distinguished by being fed with limestone reservoirs. And so
Mm.
the limestone pretty much is fed into these eruptions. Now, my question is, if the who's doing the self-regulating of Earth, are the arc volcanoes actually, doing the work on behalf of Mother Earth, Grandmother Earth, and trying to combat as best it can the bad carbon emissions that humanity is releasing? My thoughts
Mm.
are that they are, if they do in fact exist. If they don't exist, then certainly a sentient Earth may be responsible for the controlled volcanic eruptions in progress all over the world,
Yeah, I
all
think
in an
Italy just had
attempt
one.
to stabilize what humanity has done. And so, if you take note, beginning in June 2025, just leading into June, there's been six volcanoes, three of which are arc volcanoes. And
Mhm.
so, AI and myself have been getting into lengthy arguments and conversations and exchanges on you know possibility and the ridiculousness therein. But to me, it's beginning to make sense. How when you start looking at limestone, when you start looking at limestone as perhaps being a source of contention one day between human beings and ETs. Limestone at this stage, if I am thinking clearly, is serves as a pressure valve. The more humanity releases this stuff, then Earth or whoever, an exterior force releases the good carbon. So it's just a constant fight to stabilize what humanity is doing to Earth. And so enter UFOs. Why are UFOs making themselves more known? It's
Mhm.
seemingly, uh, of course, we've got the old Codger network on Capitol Hill that, for whatever reason, they've delayed ufology for 50 or 60 years or more,
Yep.
almost like pharmaceuticals, just a denial, that wouldn't work and etc. So, we've been uh, harmful to ourselves, those who believe that some information shouldn't be imparted to us. It may be sensitive, but, some of that is based on errant philosophy, errant beliefs in religion and whatnot. But, the bottom line is, I think we're in a difficult situation ecologically with uh, the current administration hell bent on cutting down more trees, drilling excessively to the point where, we're not going to have anything left. I mean, fast, a double time, triple time, whatever. But those are some of the things exterior that, of course, through my mind, yes, seeing UFOs are extraordinary, but what do they mean? Why are they here? That's a greater question. Why look for them when we need to find out just exactly what they're doing here? And they're not just flying through the air, you know, just entertaining us. There's a reason.
No, there's a
And
reason.
so, that's those are some of the thoughts I've had, Justin.
Yeah. No, again, like I think the native culture all over the United States has their connection with the Star people and have such interesting stories that are also similar, especially like the Hopi. Like I love their story of their creation stories and uh, interdimensional beings and like the ant people to the sky beings, and they're all coming down. I love how the physical interaction with the people. And when these ETs left and they said they were going to return in the future, these Hopis started making the dolls to pass down to the kids. So one day in the future, these kids won't be terrified when these things show up at the front door. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So no, I just I love it. I love the fact that it's so rich here in America, the ancient astronaut connection. And here in Wisconsin too, we have a lot of native reservations here, and
Hmm.
they have I have a I have a cabin out in Eagle River, and there's an interesting story out in Eagle River. Can I tell you really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
This guy named Joe Simonton, and it was back in 1961, where he was in his house just eating breakfast, and he happens to look out the window, and out of nowhere comes a flying saucer down like an elevator onto his driveway. And he runs out and he's very confused. And this door opens and uh, this human ET comes out and he's wearing a blue tight jumpsuit and he had an empty jug and he was motioning for water like he needed something to drink. Joe was trying to talk to him and the ET wasn't saying anything, but he had very penetrating eyes. So Joe went and fetched some water, and for um, the exchange for water, he noticed there was two other ETs in the craft that were over this flat, flameless grill, and they were cooking these pancakes type things. And Joe got four of these pancakes from these ETs that like for the exchange of water. But again, there's no words exchanged. And it was just
Mm.
very weird. And the fact that Joe called the authorities after this incident happened, the ETs just hopped in their vehicle and just flew off into the sky. And he was left there with these greasy pancakes. And he actually took a bite of one of these, and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. So he gave this to scientists, and they did some research, and they found out that they were regular buckwheat pancakes, but didn't have any trace of salt. And that's impossible because everything organic on Earth has a trace of salt because of the oceans. So these could have been made off planet because maybe whatever planet they came from didn't have salt.
Mm.
Maybe had buckwheat, but very mysterious, you know. But no, Wisconsin, like when you said about the rocks and limestone, that reminds me of another place here in Wisconsin called Dundee Mountain. And this
Mm.
place has a rich history of UFO sightings with UFOs hovering over this mountain. And the natives call this place Spirit Hill.
Mm.
So this has again a long history of you know just stuff. But the unique thing about the mountain was it was created by the glaciers. So the glaciers had this running river underneath the glacier that was just piling up rocks, and
Mm.
then it just became this kind of a mountain thing.
Wow.
I don't have pictures, unfortunately, of it, but I was gonna say too, like Aztec land. I was showing you this yesterday with the land pyramids here. That's about 30 minutes away from Madison. Very mysterious people came from afar and battled with other Indians in the area, and then just disappeared from one day, and this left this mysterious pyramids. That's why there's archaeologists believe that the Aztec or the Maya might have migrated all the way north, but a lot of the people think they might have came. This might have been the first kind of start because they were saying follow the corn, because the corn is where like the man-made stuff is like the stuff was all up here in Iowa and Wisconsin
Mm.
and Minnesota and Illinois. Yeah, so again, like makes you wonder if this could be an older spot. And then there's a place called Rock Lake that's about 5 miles away from Aztalan, where I just showed you. They have I'm sorry, 10 elongated pyramids that are on
Mm.
the bottom of the lake, and they're like the first Europeans that were coming through here were asking the natives what these were, and they were saying that they're the stone teepees from the ancient ones that they don't know about because it's underwater, like, but they know it's a lost culture. So again, there's rich history here in Wisconsin. I'm very blessed to be born in the Midwest, and this I just love the native culture, and I feel like they have the best knowledge and the closest connection to these physical beings that we once interacted with in the remote past.
Mhm.
So
Hey,
no,
I just thought of something, and I'll impart this as well, Dustin.
mm,
I'll sing a song first, and they'll serve as introduction. Um, I'm a poet primarily, a writer, working on a manuscript of essays right now, in addition to the poetry. But I compose Meskwaki word songs, and several years ago, I think this was probably before the pandemic, I composed a song for a spider, and this was based on my son and I going down to the porch to have a smoke one night, late night, and a spider web caught me in the face, and I backed up, trying to not create a mess and get a spider on my face. But that incident eventually made me think of a song for this spider, his presence here and purpose. So
mm,
he was hunting, and so the song is about him hunt the spider hunting, and
cool.
I hope I can remember it.
Yeah.
Let me see. wanna SOP 别只是写我这个把怪后悔给呀嘞，会呀，还要会哟，会呀，还要会，哎呀。wanna has a big hole，别继续写我这个把怪后悔给俺嘞，哎呀嘿嘿呀嘿嘿呀，哎呀喂哟，哎呀嘿嘿呀嘿嘿呀，哎呀喂，哎呀哎嘿呀哈。That was, I believe, published in the Washington Post a couple of years
Wow.
ago for
That's
National
beautiful, by the way.
Poetry Day.
Seriously, that was very
But
beautiful.
the song itself is cool. I like singing it. I like thinking about its composition. But the more I think about spiders and their presence, start thinking about limestone and what it represents possibly to UFOs and how they may you know power their crafts or use limestone as a source of medicine and so forth. But as I began thinking about the spiders and their song, I started doing research as well and discovered through an article in the Atlantic magazine several years ago that some spiders have been discovered way out in the ocean, and they tried to figure out how in the hell did these spiders get over here. And then they determined that some spiders emit the spider webs purposely if they can sense electricity in the air. I'm sensing this is geomagnetic electromagnetic energy, and so
Oh,
they get to release some of the spider web until it gets contact like static electricity,
huh.
and
Yeah.
then they ascend to the heavens thereafter. 400 or 500 spiders coming down in the middle of the ocean on a boat is incredible. But this is what the article is based upon. And, the more they thought about it, then they realized that, spiders do fly. And I thought, holy smoke, could that also pertain to UFO propulsion?
Oh.
And the more I thought about it, I said, shit, yeah, it does. Excuse me. Um,
No, you could
it,
cuss.
it does because, and I'm going to go back a step back a little bit now.
Sure.
Now, in 1980, in fall, when my wife Stella and I, along with my parents and several households on Sackambog Road, all came out after we saw them the second night. This mothership, this monstrous UFO that it was beautiful that covered one-fourth of the sky, uh, was in the company of a fleet of smaller UFOs, and
Whoa.
they were going slow motion for us to observe. So I think they were letting us off the hook, kind of like a therapeutic visit to
Sure.
advise Stella and myself that we weren't crazy. In fact, we've allowed you to, summon your parents and the neighbors to observe us. So here we are. And so we're watching this spectacle, with binoculars. But the one thing that I noticed was that it was you know, spectacular craft. Uh, but the thing I noticed most was the appendages, the tubular in form that were hanging from the rim of the craft. There was probably about 10 to 12, if not 15, uh, hanging, and they look like upside down deep sea fishing
Yeah, I
poles,
think
the kind that
I
are
got a
bent,
picture of it here.
and then they're upside down. And so this mothership was cruising from the northeast going to the southeast over our tribal land. And so we as we were looking at it, those lights, those kind of like appendages, the tubular hangings were transparent. They were, I believe, electrically charged at the tips. They were like Fourth of July sparklers,
Yep.
muted, and so that was cool to see. And so they disappeared to the southwest. But since then, I've theorized that the same principle with electric energy used by spiders is also used by UFOs. The tentacles or the appendages hanging from the craft itself, in my opinion, now served as conduits of this electricity. And it's
Mm,
almost like an equivalent would be like a San Francisco cable car or like the old time Iowa cable cars, wherein, the streetcars themselves were connected to a cable on top with electricity and stuff sparking out. It's the same principle that I believe UFOs are using the geomagnetic energy that is present uh, naturally globally, but with the presence of Kinderhook limestone that may have properties that are can be harnessed by UFOs. The limestone itself that extends from the Iowa River for about 2 miles deep beneath our tribal homeland may serve as a counterbalance or an electrical counterbalance to the UFOs seeking, an alternative source of energy to propel
hmm
upon. And so in my thinking, they just tap into this. They have the capacity to zip away, in seconds and all that stuff. But in order to reserve some of their energy supplies, they probably depend upon, what's floating over the earth. And, it's one needs to assess that the earth itself is highly electrified by, thunder and lightning,
Yeah.
24/7. And
Yeah.
so we have this element uh, through the limestone, you know, serving as a hypothesis as to why they were here and what their purpose was. I don't have the proof at this stage, but I believe that with more research, humanity will understand the role of limestone in the geological, ecological processes, and how to convert it into energy wherein we can successfully make the bad carbons into, carbons that we can breathe and to alleviate this problem of global warming. Those are the
hmm
things that course through my head. It's not so much being bedazzled by UFOs. Yeah, that's cool and incredible. But that happened 45 years ago. I've
Yeah.
seen another one since. There were about 15 of them going over our house here about 15, 20 years ago. I greeted them in Meskwaki and was glad to see them, as I told them. But they were interested. It seemed like they were playing a kids' game. 15 or 20 UFOs zigzagging through the sky like a sidewinder snake right above me and
Whoa.
going west and following one another. Follow the leader, but I'm gonna go like a snake. And that was cool. I
That
mean,
is
that was the
cool.
last time. That was the last
Wow.
time. You
Wow.
know, a collective observation. But then recently, November, I think it was October 28, 2023, I videotaped an orange orb, headed to the house following Highway 30. It was the size of a volleyball, but that one, traveled about, oh my God, 300 yards following the power lines to our house. And as soon as that thing detected perhaps the camera or my presence on the back porch, it ascended over the giant oak tree we have here, but it's toppled by the hurricane winds. But as it ascended, it changed color to gray and disappeared.
Hmm.
That to me was an orb of undetermined origin. I have no idea what that was, but when I took a frame of the video, what I saw was humorous. It looked like a orange pumpkin with a green stem with those eyes, jack-o'-lantern eyes, and so forth.
Yeah. Weird.
Then my thoughts were, are UFOs, tricksters? Are they trying to blend in
Yeah, they do.
and, assimilate themselves by, these silly apparitions and so forth? But at the
You're
same
exactly right.
time, around that same time in Des Moines, Iowa, there was a videotape recording of a young man who had seen a happy face UFO in the sky and reported it. And, that to me was, a blunt, hello, I'm here. And,
Yeah.
what do you make of this?
Yeah.
And so
No.
these things, I believe, are being purposely done by UFOs.
Yes.
I don't think a pilot will ever catch up with one. That's absurd.
No.
For America to declare war on UFOs is a lost battle because they already know
Oh yeah.
what your plan is
Game
even
over.
before you enact it.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we've observed is that they can shift to anything they want. That America has to catch up on. They are also extraordinary psychics, profilers. They have the ability to scan your weaknesses and your strengths. And being taught in animism here as a Native American, Meskwaki, wherein we believe that elements in nature like trees, rocks, and rivers and so forth are capable of speech, thought, and feelings, runs counter to what Euro Americans popularly believe that such things can be debunked. They don't happen. They don't exist. The only thing that exists is my God and so forth. But
No.
uh,
No.
beyond that, we there are things here that happen that need to be looked at carefully to see what all of this means, obviously, and we may never find out in the end. We all die
Oh,
without
but if
having known what the real answer is. But in the meantime, it's interesting and it's fun, and
it is, no,
I
it
think we
makes
should have.
life more exciting, I believe.
It does, and
No, and the fact that you're a poet and you sing and you write books, again, you're very creative and you have a lot of charisma, and that's so great. No, I think that everybody needs to hear your story, and I think you have something special that they keep showing up once in a while to keep you knowing that, hey, we know that we're here, and the fact that, like, I don't know, it's so cool. No, I'm very honored to get to hear your story, and but yeah, I think we're wrapping up to here for an hour. We're past an hour
Okay,
now,
yeah, yeah. We
but
can
no, that
we
was
can sum up. We can summarize and close
no,
off. So,
you know, hey, I would like to have you back because I feel like you have a lot more stories to share.
oh hell, yeah. Remember, I sent you a graph of a map of known ordinary events. What we have yet to talk about is, I'll just give you an
Yeah,
encapsulation.
yeah.
What year was it? 1997. I saw a transparent orb, much like the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz, travel up the road, Meskwaki Road, up to our house, about 100 yards. And, just when I was about to get the camera, it went, descended onto the bottom door and left, they just left me puzzled. But the next day, a private detective knocked at my door from New Mexico, asking if I would be interested in partaking of a search for a young Mexican boy that had been abducted in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh shit.
And so, yes, that's one story. The other story is when a line of trees along the Iowa River, about a mile and a half from here, were broken for about 150 yards or so, with the young maple saplings, 4 to 6 inches diameter, uh, toppling at, at each footstep I took on the railroad tracks.
Oh,
So that in itself was scary. I was armed with the 22 Magnum H&R, I believe at that time, just out for a walk, scouting for deer probably or something like that along those lines. But as soon it was evening, but as I saw the trees crash, I thought, hell, that's Bigfoot. I'm not going to fire that way. I'm
I was
just
gonna
going to
ask you too.
get the hell out of here.
Maybe we could talk about Bigfoot too. If I'm pretty sure your culture too has some stories of Bigfoot.
Yeah,
But
I
no,
mean, my grandmother saw one face to face while she was
oh
picking
shit.
wild berries. She was a young girl. I'm guessing
Well,
this was 1910.
let's save that story for another time though.
Yep, yep. Well,
Hey,
Dustin, I'm gonna attend to my grandchildren and my
that was
lovely
so
wife
awesome.
Salome, Ozzy, and
Yes.
Onyx, and they're cooped up in the back, and I'm sure they want to rough me up a bit. And
Cool.
I
Well,
love
hey Ray.
grandkids, and they keep me company. But there are
That's
times
so
when I
cool.
need to stray away and talk with people like you and fly in
Well,
chariots.
yes. Well, hey, thank you so much, Ray. I really, really appreciate your time and your knowledge about the UFO, uh,
Thanks for
the
letting me share
phenomenon.
my wild theories with you. And you'll
Yeah,
see these hopefully in an article, an essay, better constructed, well organized. But I've written my heart out for the stuff that I'm talking about tonight with you. Thank you very
that's
much.
awesome.
I will sign off.
All right. Well, you have a good night, Ray.
You too, Dustin. Thanks.